The galaxy was wide and full of life. Across the stars, great empires ruled with power and pride. Some had thousands of ships. Others had armies that stretched across worlds. They built cities on distant planets. They controlled trade, war, and peace. But far away from all of them, there was Earth. To the galaxy, Earth was nothing. A small, poor planet on the edge of known space. While other races grew rich and powerful, humanity struggled to survive. They had no great fleet, no great army, only scattered colonies and a home world they could not afford to lose. And now, even that was in danger. The Drax Dominion had declared war. The Drax were one of the strongest forces in the galaxy. Their leader, High Warlord Krixa, was feared by many. His fleets had crushed other worlds before. He ruled by fear and strength. And now, he had promised to wipe out Earth. The galaxy had heard his words. "I will crush the dust of Earth beneath my feet," Krixa had said. The other empires had laughed. Some even placed bets on how fast Earth would fall. No one believed humans could fight back. They had only one ship. That ship floated now in the blackness of space. It was old, damaged, slow. Its name was the Last Stand. The ship had been built from parts taken from old cargo haulers, broken military vessels, and forgotten mining machines. It creaked when it moved. Its engines roared too loud. Its weapons were few and weak. But it was all humanity had left. Commander Ethan Cole stood in the center of the ship's bridge. His hands rested behind his back. His eyes, dark and steady, watched the main view screen. Stars stretched across the black sky. Somewhere out there, the Drax fleet was on its way. Ethan had seen war before. He had fought on small moons and distant stations. He had lost friends. He had seen defeat. But this was different. He turned to face his crew. There were only 47 of them. Engineers, pilots, and volunteers. Some had never fired a weapon in their lives. They had left behind families, homes, and futures. They had come because no one else would. Ethan took a slow breath. His voice was calm but firm. "You all know why we're here," he began. The crew stood silently, listening. "The galaxy thinks we are nothing. They think Earth will fall without a fight. The Drax are coming to destroy us. They will expect us to run. They will expect us to beg. But they will find us standing in their way." He paused, looking at each crew member. "We are not here to win glory. We're not here to make them fear us. We are here to protect home. We are here to give our people a chance to live. That is enough." The crew nodded. No one spoke. The silence said more than words could. Ethan turned back to the controls. A red light blinked on the console. The Earth Council was waiting for his message. He leaned forward, pressed the button, and spoke into the ship-wide channel. "This is Commander Ethan Cole of the Last Stand," he said. "We are moving to meet the Drax fleet. We may not return. But know this, we fight for Earth. We fight for every life behind us. We fight because someone must." He ended the message. The light on the console turned off. No cheers followed. No music played. Only the hum of the engines filled the air. The ship began to move, slow but steady. It turned toward the distant stars, leaving Earth far behind. The crew took their positions. Engineers checked the failing engines. Pilots adjusted their course. Weapons officers ran last-minute checks on the old guns. The medical team prepared for the worst. Ethan stood on the bridge, watching it all. He knew the truth. This ship was not strong. This crew was not trained soldiers. But they had something the Drax would never understand. They had heart. And sometimes heart was enough. As the Last Stand moved into the dark, the galaxy watched. They laughed, sure that the little human ship would be crushed in seconds. But they were wrong to laugh. Because this ship, this crew, was about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. The Last Stand moved deeper into space. It was quiet on the bridge. No one spoke unless they had to. The crew focused on their tasks. Every movement mattered. Every second felt heavier than the last. Ethan stood near the navigation panel. He watched the maps as the ship moved closer to the edge of human space. Beyond that, there was nothing but open darkness. Somewhere in that darkness, the Drax fleet was waiting. His second-in-command, Ava Chun, walked up beside him. She was younger than Ethan, sharp and steady. She had served with him before, back when the military still had more than one ship. She spoke softly. Scanners picked up something, she said. Long range. Faint signals. It's them. Ethan nodded without looking away from the screen. How many? He asked. Ava swallowed. Too many to count. Ethan already knew the answer, but he had asked anyway. He needed the crew to hear it. He needed them to understand what they were facing. The Drax Dominion had not sent a small force. They had sent a fleet big enough to crush entire systems. The signal was clear now. It filled the scanner screen like a wave. Ships, hundreds of them, were closing in. The crew watched the screen in silence. Some stood frozen. Others glanced at each other, fear in their eyes. Ethan turned to face them again. His voice stayed steady. We knew they would come in force, he said. We knew the numbers. This changes nothing. We moved forward. He saw a few heads lower as people swallowed their fear and returned to their stations. That was good. He needed them focused. The comm officer spoke up next. Commander, incoming message. It's from Crixa himself. Ethan gave a small nod. Put it through, he ordered. The screen flickered, then showed the face of High Warlord Crixa. His skin was dark and scale like stone. His eyes were bright yellow and cold. He leaned forward in his chair, his sharp teeth showing as he smiled. Is this your mighty defense, human? Crixa spoke slowly, his voice deep and mocking. One ship, one broken shell, standing in my path. I expected more. Ethan didn't move. He stood tall and calm. He didn't care about Crix's words. He didn't care about the sneer on the warlord's face. But he knew his crew was watching. He had to answer. You expected us to beg, Ethan replied. You expected us to run. You were wrong. Crixa let out a low laugh. You will burn in the dark, human. Your people will kneel, or they will die. This is your last moment. Remember it well. The screen cut off. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Ethan looked at Ava. She gave a small nod. The crew waited for his command. All hands, battle stations, Ethan ordered. Set a course straight for them. We meet them head-on. The ship moved forward again. The crew rushed to their positions. Every system was pushed to the limit. The engines groaned louder. Lights flickered as power shifted to the weapons and shields. In the engineering bay, Chief Engineer Tomas worked with his small team. The engines were overheating. He knew they couldn't push the ship much longer without risking a total breakdown. But they had no choice. They had to keep moving. In the weapons bay, 2 gunners prepared the ship's rail cannons. The cannons were slow and weak compared to modern weapons, but they were all the ship had. They loaded the rounds by hand, sweat dripping from their faces. On the bridge, Ethan stood at the center. He felt the weight of every life on board. He felt the eyes of every person on Earth watching from far away. He closed his eyes for a moment, just long enough to gather his thoughts. We fight here, he whispered to himself. We fight now. The distance between the last stand and the Drax fleet closed faster and faster. Soon, the enemy ships would be in range. Ethan knew they had one small advantage: surprise. The Drax were not expecting a real fight. They would not expect humans to attack first. Ethan planned to use that. Prepare to fire all weapons on my command, he said. The crew moved quickly, locking targets. The gunners waited for the order. The engines kept pushing the ship forward. The Drax fleet grew larger on the screen. Dozens of ships, then hundreds. All of them armed, all of them ready to crush the last stand. Ethan stood firm. His heart beat steady. He knew what was coming. He knew this was only the beginning. But he would not turn back. Not now. Not ever. The stars seemed to vanish as the Drax fleet moved closer. Their ships filled the dark space ahead, black shapes with red lights glowing along their sides. Dozens of large battleships. Hundreds of smaller attack vessels. The last stand moved alone toward them. On the bridge, Ethan stood ready. His eyes never left the screen. His crew waited for his order. Every hand was ready on every control. Hold fire, Ethan said quietly. His voice cut through the heavy silence. The crew followed his lead. The ship drifted forward, steady and calm, like a shadow in the dark. The Drax fleet didn't open fire. Not yet. They watched, waiting. Maybe they thought Ethan would surrender. Maybe they wanted to drag it out, to show the galaxy how easy it was to destroy Earth's last ship. Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew what they were doing, and he had no plans to let them control the fight. "Take us toward that debris field," Ethan ordered, pointing at a cluster of broken rocks and scrap metal floating in the distance. Ava nodded. "Yes, Commander." The engines groaned louder as the ship turned. It drifted toward the debris field, what was left of an old mining station that had been destroyed long ago. Sharp metal chunks floated there, spinning slowly in the dark. The Drax ships followed, still silent. "Charge weapons," Ethan said. "Prepare to fire on my signal." Tomas, down in engineering, pushed the failing engines harder. The ship shook under the pressure. Sparks flew from the panels, but the ship kept moving. The crew held their breath as the power levels dropped dangerously low. Ethan waited until the Drax ships entered the edge of the debris field. "Target their lead ship," he ordered. "Fire." The last stand came to life. Its old rail cannons roared. The first shot slammed into the nearest Drax battleship, cracking its outer hull. Another shot followed, hitting a smaller ship nearby. The Drax ships lit up in response, alarms flashing across their decks. The fight had begun. The Drax opened fire with heavy plasma blasts. Bright streams of energy shot toward the last stand. The human ship ducked behind thick pieces of spinning metal, using the debris as cover. "Keep moving," Ethan shouted. "Stay behind the field." The crew worked together, turning the ship left and right. The engines hissed and screamed, but they held. The gunners fired shot after shot, hitting enemy ships that got too close. The old ship's systems flickered, but the crew stayed focused. Inside the debris field, the Drax ships had trouble moving. Their larger ships couldn't turn fast enough. They started crashing into the floating wreckage, breaking apart their own lines. Ethan saw it happen on the screen. "Good," he whispered. "Keep them close. Keep them tangled." The Drax were forced to split up. Their ships scattered, trying to surround the last stand in the tight space. But Ethan stayed ahead, moving just fast enough to avoid being trapped. On the bridge, the tension grew with every second. "Shields are dropping fast," Ava warned. "Engines are overheating," Tomas added through the speaker. Ethan knew they couldn't keep this up forever. He leaned over the map, looking for a way out. He saw a narrow gap in the field, just wide enough to fit through. "Full speed toward that opening," he ordered. "All weapons, cover our escape." The ship turned sharply, heading for the gap. The Drax followed, firing wildly. Plasma blasts tore into the debris around them. Some shots hit the ship's outer hull, sending sparks flying. Alarms blared as damage reports lit up the screens. But the last stand pushed forward. The crew held their positions, refusing to panic. The ship burst out of the debris field, engines burning at full power. It spun around quickly, facing the scattered Drax ships trapped inside the field. "Fire all weapons," Ethan commanded. The cannons roared again. The Drax ships struggled to turn. Some crashed into each other. Some broke apart on sharp metal edges. Others tried to fire back, but they were too slow. Ethan watched as several enemy ships exploded, filling the field with fire and wreckage. But the victory was small. More Drax ships were still coming. Bigger ships, heavier weapons. The main fleet had not even fully joined the fight yet. "Status?" Ethan asked. Ava checked the readings. Shields down to 40%. Engines close to failing. Weapons overheating. "We can't keep this up much longer." Ethan nodded. He knew she was right, but he also knew they had done something no one thought was possible. They had struck first. They had survived the first wave, and they had made the Drax bleed. Ethan stood tall at the center of the bridge. He looked around at his tired but determined crew. "This isn't over," he said. "Not by a long shot." The crew nodded in silence. They knew the truth. The hardest part was still ahead. The last stand floated beyond the wrecked debris field. Smoke leaked from the side of the ship. Fires had started in the lower decks. Sparks flickered in the halls. The crew moved fast to put them out. Ethan stood on the bridge, staring at the damage reports flashing on the main screen. Shields were almost gone. Engines were close to failure. Weapons were red-hot and nearly useless. They had taken heavy damage in the first clash, and the Drax were still coming. "Commander," Ava said, her voice tense. New wave detected. Bigger ships. Heavier weapons. They'll be on top of us in minutes. Ethan nodded. He already knew. He had expected it. The real fleet was finally moving. Casualty report, Ethan asked softly. The comm officer lowered his head before answering. 12 dead. 9 injured. We lost life support on decks 3 and 4. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. 12 names. 12 faces. Gone. He knew every crew member. He had spoken to all of them before they left Earth. They had trusted him. They had followed him into the dark. And now they were gone. The ship shook again as something hit the outer hull. Another warning light flashed on the screen. Structural damage near the rear thrusters. Tomas reported from engineering. We can patch it, but not while under fire. If the engines fail, we're done. Ethan pressed his hand against the console. He could feel the ship's pulse, weak but still beating. The last stand was old, but it was still alive for now. He turned to Ava. How long until the main fleet reaches us? Ava checked the scanner. Not long. We're running out of time. Ethan knew they couldn't run, but they couldn't face the full fleet head-on either. He looked at the map again, thinking. He searched for anything, any weak spot, any gap, any chance to turn the fight in their favor. His eyes narrowed. There, he whispered. He pointed at a small asteroid field drifting far to the right of their position. It wasn't much. The rocks were smaller than the ones in the debris field. But if they could hide there, even for a short time, they might have a chance to regroup. Set course for the asteroid field, Ethan ordered. We'll buy time to repair the engines and cool the weapons. Ava nodded, but there was worry in her eyes. Commander, they'll follow us. We can't hide forever. Ethan knew she was right, but they had no choice. Prepare the crew, he said. We hold together as long as we can. The ship turned toward the asteroid field. The engines roared weakly, shaking the whole vessel. Every step forward felt heavier than the last. As they moved, the crew worked fast to patch the damage. Engineers sealed broken pipes. Medics treated the wounded. Gunners tried to cool the weapons. Every person on board knew what was coming. Ethan moved to the lower decks, walking through the smoke-filled halls. He passed by crew members sitting against the walls, some holding bandages to their wounds. Others sat quietly, staring at nothing. He stopped when he saw Jace, one of the younger engineers, sitting alone near a broken panel. Jace looked up as Ethan approached. We're not going to make it, are we? Jace asked quietly. Ethan knelt down in front of him. We're still here, Ethan said. As long as we're breathing, we fight. You hear me? Jace nodded slowly, though the fear in his eyes didn't fade. Ethan stood and placed a hand on Jace's shoulder. Then he turned and walked back toward the bridge. The asteroid field was just ahead. Small rocks floated in the dark, spinning slowly. The ship moved between them, slipping into the shadows. The crew held their breath. Every light on the ship was dimmed. Every engine sound was lowered to a soft hum. They waited. On the scanners, the Drax fleet kept moving. It was getting closer. Too close. Ethan looked at Ava. They're still tracking us, she said softly. Ethan nodded. They want us to burn. The ship shook again. A sharp impact rang through the hull. Another. And another. The Drac had found them. Plasma blasts lit up the rocks around them. Ethan stood tall, gripping the rail in front of him. Hold position, he ordered. Prepare for close-range combat. The crew braced themselves. The ship rocked again as more blasts hit the hull. In engineering, Tomas shouted over the noise. We can't take much more of this. Ethan knew it. The ship was breaking apart. They had reached the edge. This was the breaking point. But Ethan refused to give in. He leaned forward, staring at the scanner. He saw the Drax flagship, larger than the rest, moving in behind the other ships. It was holding back, safe behind its fleet. Ethan's mind raced. There was only one way left. A direct strike at the heart of the enemy. He turned to his crew. We have one move left, he said. We hit the flagship. Head on. We end this, or we fall here. Ava's eyes widened. It's suicide, Commander. Ethan nodded. Maybe, but if we can take Crixa down, the rest might fall apart. The crew stood silent, listening. Finally, Ava gave a small nod. We'll follow you, she whispered. Ethan looked at every face on the bridge. He knew the cost, but there was no other way. Prepare all engines. Prepare all weapons, he ordered. One last charge. The crew moved without fear now. They knew the risk. They knew the price. But they also knew the reason. They were fighting for home, and they were not done yet. The last stand groaned under its own weight. The lights dimmed again. Systems failed one by one. The ship had nothing left to give, and yet it still moved. Ethan stood on the bridge, staring at the enemy fleet ahead. His hands were tight on the edge of the control panel. His face showed no fear, only focus. "The flagship," he said again, louder this time. "That's our target." The crew said nothing. They already knew. High Warlord Crix's ship was larger than all the others. It sat behind the Drax fleet, watching like a predator. It hadn't fired a single shot yet. It didn't need to. The other ships had done all the work. The flagship stayed back, proud and untouched. Ethan knew Crixa was watching them now, waiting for them to fall. "We take the fight to him," Ethan said. "We take the last stand straight through their lines. If we reach him, we finish this." Ava turned to face him. "We won't survive the charge." Ethan nodded. He knew that too. "I know the cost," he said. "But if Crixa falls, his fleet might fall apart. They follow him. Without him, they lose their leader. This is our only chance." Ava looked around at the tired, battered crew. She could see the fear on their faces, but she also saw something else. They hadn't given up. Not yet. Ava turned back to Ethan. She gave a slow nod. "We'll see it through, Commander." Ethan took a deep breath. He pressed the ship-wide speaker. "All hands. This is Commander Cole," he began. "We are making a final charge. We aim for the Drax flagship. We aim for Crixa. This will not be easy. Many of us may not survive. But if we don't try, Earth will fall. If you cannot stay, leave your station now. I won't hold it against you." He waited. No one left. Not a single crew member moved. Ethan smiled faintly. "Then let's finish this," he said. The crew moved fast. Engineers pushed the broken engines harder. Gunners loaded the last rounds into the overheated cannons. Medical teams prepared for the worst. Down in engineering, Tomas wiped the sweat from his face. "She won't hold together much longer," he muttered. But even as he said it, he kept working. His team patched what they could. They knew this was the last push. On the bridge, Ava locked in the course. "Ready on your mark," she said. Ethan looked at the scanner one last time. The Drax fleet was lined up ahead, waiting to finish them. Crix's flagship sat in the back, just out of reach. "Full speed," Ethan ordered. "Take us right through them." The engines roared louder than ever before. The ship shook as power surged through its dying systems. The lights flickered again. Sparks rained from broken panels. The last stand pushed forward. The Drax ships started to move, closing in fast. Plasma blasts lit up the dark space. Energy beams streaked past the ship. Some hit, rocking the hull. Alarms blared again. Shields down to 20%. Ava shouted, "We won't last long." Ethan held his ground. "Keep pushing." The first line of Drax ships closed in. The last stand fired all its cannons. The shots tore through one of the smaller ships, sending it spinning into another. Both exploded in a wave of fire. The ship pushed through the wreckage. More blasts hit the hull. Metal tore away. Fires broke out on several decks. Oxygen leaked from the lower levels. In engineering, Tomas and his team fought to keep the engines running. Steam hissed from broken pipes. The floor shook under their feet. "Give me all you've got," Tomas yelled. "We're not dead yet." On the bridge, Ethan saw the second wave of Drax ships moving in. "We can't break through," Ava warned. Ethan's mind raced. They needed something more. Something the Drax wouldn't expect. He slammed his fist on the console. "Divert all power to engines," he ordered. "Cut life support on the lower decks. Shut down non-essential systems. Push everything into speed." Ava froze for a second. "That will kill the engines for good." Ethan nodded. "It's the only way." Ava didn't argue. She gave the command. Tomas heard the new orders in engineering. His face tightened, but he followed them. He knew what this meant. There would be no turning back. Power surged through the engines again. The last stand shot forward like a spear. The Drax ships fired, but they were too slow to stop the sudden burst of speed. The human ship slammed through their lines, scraping against one of their larger ships. Metal tore away, but the last stand kept going. Ahead, the flagship grew larger on the screen. Ethan stood firm. "Prepare for ramming speed," he ordered. The crew braced themselves. Alarms screamed louder. The engines glowed bright red. Smoke filled the halls. The ship shook so hard that panels broke loose and fell to the floor. Sparks rained down on the crew. Ava looked at Ethan one last time. "It's been an honor, Commander." Ethan nodded. "Likewise." The flagship filled the screen, close enough to see its dark armor plates and glowing lights. Ethan gave the final order. "All hands, prepare to board." The ship raced toward the Drax flagship, ready for one final move. One last stand. The last stand raced toward the massive Drax flagship. Every alarm on board screamed. Flames burned in the lower halls. The engines roared louder than they ever had before. The ship was dying, but it was still moving. Ethan gripped the rail on the bridge as the ship closed the final distance. Crix's flagship loomed in front of them like a dark mountain in space. Its guns fired again and again, but the last stand kept pushing through the fire. The crew braced for impact. With a final burst of power, the last stand smashed into the side of the Drax flagship. The collision shook both ships. Metal tore apart. Sparks and smoke filled the bridge. Ethan hit the floor hard, but pushed himself up. "Boarding teams, move now," he shouted. Ava was already moving. She grabbed her rifle and ran toward the docking hatch with a small team of crew members. They carried old weapons, nothing compared to what the Drax had. But they carried something more: determination. Ethan grabbed his own weapon and followed. The docking arms locked with the enemy ship. The doors hissed open. The human crew rushed through the smoke into the Drax ship. Inside, the halls of the Drax flagship were wide and cold. The walls were dark metal. Red lights flashed. Loud alarms echoed through the ship. The Drax soldiers were already waiting. Tall, armored, and armed with plasma rifles, they opened fire as the humans entered. The two sides clashed in the narrow hallways. Lasers and bullets filled the air. Ethan ducked behind a metal beam, returning fire. Beside him, Ava shouted orders to the crew, guiding them through the chaos. One by one, they pushed deeper into the ship. It was brutal. The Drax soldiers were stronger, faster, better armed. But the human crew fought like they had nothing left to lose. Ethan led the charge down the main hallway toward the command center. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew Crixa was there. He had to be. If they could take him down, this nightmare might finally end. The fighting grew worse as they neared the command doors. More Drax soldiers appeared, blocking the way. The humans pushed forward anyway, losing more crew with every step. Ethan fired until his rifle ran dry. He dropped it and picked up a fallen Drax weapon. He kept moving. He had no choice. Finally, they reached the command door. It was sealed shut. "Tomas, status on the charges?" Ethan called through the comm. Tomas, still on a last stand, answered quickly. "Charges set. Ready on your word." Ethan looked around. Only a handful of his crew were still standing. Ava was still there, blood on her face but alive. "Do it," Ethan ordered. A loud blast shook the door. The metal tore open, sending smoke and debris into the air. Ethan and Ava charged through the broken entrance. Inside, Crixa stood waiting. The Drax warlord was taller than any soldier they had faced. His dark, scaled skin shimmered under the red lights. His yellow eyes locked on Ethan. Crixa let out a low growl. "You should have stayed on your dying world," he said coldly. Ethan didn't answer. He raised the stolen Drax weapon and fired. Crixa moved fast, knocking the weapon from Ethan's hands. The two crashed into each other, locked in a brutal fight. Ethan swung his fist, landing a hard blow to Crix's jaw. But Crixa barely flinched. He grabbed Ethan by the neck and slammed him against the wall. Ethan struggled, gasping for air. Ava raised her weapon to fire, but a Drax guard knocked it from her hands. She fought the guard with everything she had, trying to reach Ethan. Ethan grabbed a broken metal rod from the floor. With the last of his strength, he drove it into Crix's side. Crixa roared in pain, loosening his grip. Ethan broke free and tackled Crixa to the floor. They fought hand to hand, neither giving up. Crixa reached for a blade on his belt. He raised it high, but Ethan moved first. He drove the rod deeper into Crix's chest. The warlord's yellow eyes widened in shock. He let out a final breath and collapsed to the floor, motionless. Ethan stood over the body, breathing hard. The Drac guards froze. Without their leader, they seemed lost. Confused. The humans held their ground, weapons ready. Slowly, the Drac soldiers lowered their weapons. One by one, they backed away. Ethan looked at Ava. "It's over," he said softly. Ava nodded, her face pale with shock and relief. Ethan turned to his remaining crew. "Get back to the last stand. We're going home." The halls of the Drac's flagship fell silent. The battle was over. Krixa, the warlord who had promised to destroy Earth, now lay dead on the floor of his own command center. Ethan stood over the body for a long moment. His breath was heavy. His body ached from the fight. But he was alive. So was Ava. So was part his crew. Behind him, the Drac's soldiers stood frozen. Without Krix's orders, they did not move. They no longer fired their weapons. Their leader was gone. Their victory had turned into confusion. Ethan lowered his weapon. He looked around at the remaining crew. "Fall back to the last stand," he ordered. They moved quickly, carrying the wounded. No one dared to stop them. As they crossed back through the wrecked docking tunnel, Ethan looked at the damage to the last stand. The ship had been torn apart. Fires burned along the hull. Air leaked from the broken sections. It looked like a dead ship, but still held together. Barely. Ethan climbed back onto the bridge. The ship was cold. The lights flickered. The engines were dead. Ava followed him, wiping blood from her face. "Commander," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "The fleet." Ethan turned toward the cracked view screen. Outside, the Drac's fleet floated silently. The enemy ships held their position, but they didn't move. They didn't fire. They had watched their leader fall. Now, they didn't seem to know what to do next. Ethan opened the ship's broadcast channel, aiming it at the Drac's fleet. "This is Commander Ethan Cole," he said. His voice was steady, though the ship shook under his feet. "Your leader is dead. Your battle is over. Stand down, or face what we did to Krixa." He waited. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the enemy ships began to turn. One by one, they backed away. Some powered down their weapons. Others started to drift into retreat. No orders came from the flagship. No new leader stepped forward. The Drac's fleet was breaking apart. Ethan let out a long breath. He turned to Ava. "It's over," he said again, more to himself than anyone else. The crew on the bridge sat back in their seats, silent and exhausted. Many had tears in their eyes. Some wept openly. They had made it. They had done what no one thought was possible. Ethan knew their victory had come at a terrible cost. Many lives had been lost. The ship had been nearly destroyed. But Earth had survived. He reached for the ship-wide comm again. "This is Commander Cole," he said softly. "We're coming home." The damaged engines fired weakly, just enough to move the ship away from the Drac's flagship. The journey back to Earth was slow. The crew worked together to keep the ship from falling apart. They patched holes. They carried the wounded. They gathered the dead and gave them quiet farewells. No one spoke of glory. No one cheered. They all knew what they had given. When the last stand finally entered Earth space, the people below watched in silence. The ship looked like a ghost, burned, broken, but still flying. The Earth Council sent a message. "Ethan, is it true? Did you win?" Ethan stood on the bridge, looking down at the blue and green world below. "We're still here," he answered. That was all that needed to be said. The people of Earth cheered. All across the colonies, families cried with relief. No one had expected them to survive. No one had believed one old ship could stand against the Drac's dominion. But they had. Ethan stood by the window as the ship docked at the nearest station. He watched as the crew left the ship, helping the wounded first. He watched as families rushed to meet them. He saw the tears, the hugs, the quiet thanks. Ava stood beside him. "What now, Commander?" she asked softly. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked back at the ship, at the broken walls, the burnt panels, the empty halls. He placed his hand on the rail and took one last deep breath. "Now we rebuild," he said, "and we remember what we did here." The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. They had mocked humanity. They had laughed at the idea of one ship standing against an empire. But now they knew the truth. The last stand had done the impossible. And from that day on, the stars carried a new story. A story of courage. a story of sacrifice, a story of one ship that refused to fall.